Facilities, council recreation facilities, and I'm sorry, start over. We call it different things every time. As defined, council recreation services and public facilities committee here at 6:06 p.m. Present are all members of the committee, along with council members Smith, Kozak, and Edwards, Director Dvorsky, and our IT director, Brian Lee. Thank you. This is a little bit of a touch base for our current technical capabilities, limitations, and possibilities for the future regarding specifically the AV components and infrastructure and mechanics that allow us not only to broadcast our meeting in real time, but also reserve those records for future review. Dating back a little bit, we have been through a few different metamorphoses of how we've been recording these, probably starting around 10 years ago, if my brain's functioning right. And in those first steps, it was certainly very crude, but it was our best ability at the time, using a camera on a tripod, in which we had a contract individual come in, and she also helped with our social media and website development. So without being too historically referential here, we've been through a few different improvements, obviously, and a couple of different facilities. This room, of course, we've been broadcasting in only as needed in many years past, but over the past couple of years, due to the pandemic, we are in sort of a less than ideal circumstance as far as the acoustics, the camera angles, ceiling height, the presently required or desired distancing between individuals, the audience, etc. So obviously it seems appropriate that we review this on an occasional basis, see that we are conforming to the desires of council as far as how they would like to have these video recordings presented to the public and for themselves, if they should wish to revisit any meetings that they're either absent for or just want to review. Director Lee, I'm going to go ahead and open with you, and I've asked the city attorney to be here as well, just to reflect on any level of statutory or legal requirements that we might have, and to potentially address any questions that the committee or that council members might have about that from a record-keeping standpoint. So please open us up. We've received the email that you sent. I don't know if everyone, you did not. It's just some statistical data. Brian, you want to?
Yeah, it was a summary of, we put the system in prior to June of 2021, when in-person meetings were taking place once again. And we had some challenges at the beginning because of the size of this building, the size of this room, and like you said, the acoustics, and trying to eliminate the use of mics close to the mouth, any transmission of anything with the use of microphones sitting at each table. So we equipped this, we went out and I got 4 quotes. The top 3 quotes, one was 52,000, the next was 40,000 and change, and then there was one that was under 10,000. We knew at the time this was going to be a temporary facility, meaning this, council was not going to stay here. We were going to get a new building, new council chambers. So we went with the most economical solution, and it seemed like a decent solution for us to have, and it was under 10,000. So that system was installed. It's right there. There has been problems since that system's been put in. And most of it has to do with the actual device running the live stream. And So in the email I sent, it kind of summarized some of the problems that we've faced and the troubleshooting that has happened because of that. And it has been very random when the sound quality is no good. Sometimes it's great, there's no issue. Sometimes it may be a little hard to hear because of some of the noise in the background perhaps, but when the audio is bad, it's almost like an interference. It's a choppiness that you can't hear anybody, you can't intelligently hear anybody, what they're saying. So troubleshooting has been difficult because along the line we've tried, and I say we, the vendor and myself, we've tried various things to fix that. Bandwidth, network issue, replacing network equipment, hardwiring versus going off the Wi-Fi. And every time it seems to fix it, and then another time it pops up and it has the same audio quality issue. There's been some firmware updates that changed settings that eliminated the sound altogether, and we found out what that problem was, which is different than the original problems. So throughout that, once again, as of this week, last week, I felt like we had isolated what the problem may be based on firmware, but today I ran 5 different tests. The first one had the same poor audio quality. 4 after that were perfectly fine. We're recording now. I don't know if the audio quality is good right now without checking or not.
So in those instances where there has been a poor audio quality for the broadcast, was that consistent with the audio quality on the recording that was then published following the live broadcast?
No. So those are 2 separate recordings. The live stream had the issues with the audio. The local recording, which is also, it takes place every single time we have a local recording to a hard drive. Every time that has been perfectly fine. There's only been one of all the meetings we've held with this system, including BZA, planning, all the meetings we hold, we have only not recorded one, and that was the user error, that a new setting hadn't been checked. And so it didn't record locally. Every other meeting we've had the local recording. So I come in, grab that, upload it to YouTube, and it's up there the next day for everyone to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the benefit of this system, is it always has that local backup.
Okay. Thank you. Joelle, if you take a moment, just for sake of general review, all of us collectively, we know that there are requirements that change from time to time, and I'd love to hear your reflection on our public meeting requirements, official records, and broadcasting those to the public through electronic means.
Sure. So there's a requirement that minutes be kept for any public meeting. There's not a requirement in statute that something be recorded, or certainly not that it be recorded in a particular manner. The whole notion around recording probably gained a lot of momentum at the start of the pandemic, and you'll remember we ended up with what was called House Bill 197, which authorized public meetings to take place virtually. That measure sunsetted on July 1 of 2021, and public entities were required to go back to live in-person meetings, and certainly for meetings that have votes associated with them. So that's not really answering the recording issue. The idea of recording historically using a tape recorder was really because it was the best way to create the minutes after the meeting. It had nothing to do with any obligation to the public. Someplace there's a fine balance that needs to be reached between the public's expectations based on certain technologies that are available, and the public's need to understand that these technologies can certainly make meetings very accessible, but as Brian pointed out, there's a cost associated with them. And sometimes it's not just the cost, you know, of writing a check for hard equipment, but all of the additional time that Brian spends and that Leilani spends and that the secretaries of all the other boards and commissions spend, you know, trying to verify that everything is working properly. Like, we just think that it's, you know, touch a button and whew, everything goes magically the way we want it to go. There's a real disconnect, and obviously, you know, we have right now an IT department of one who is stretched very thin. So I fully appreciate some of the things that Brian has shared about the challenges and how, you know, sometimes it's really frustrating when we don't hear things properly or we don't see things properly, or, you know, the screen is too close or too far or whatever. I think for all intents and purposes, you know, we have done everything we can to meet the letter of the law and to go beyond the letter of the law. So there's no requirement to preserve or to preserve on YouTube or in any particular format. Again, we do that because it is an effective way to capture and document what actually transpired in a meeting. The minutes would be sufficient. Kind of shooting forward a little bit and extending this conversation maybe beyond what you just asked me to do, Anthony. The notion of House Bill 197 sunsetting has been the topic of a lot of discussion recently. Some communities have taken the position that, hey, we can do whatever we want and we want to go back to having virtual meetings in some capacity. I really question the legitimacy of that, and I wouldn't want our community to be the one that ends up on the other side of a V in a lawsuit to test that theory. But I am aware that, you know, there are some public entities around the state that are kind of going in that direction and sort of, you know, waiting or baiting somebody to test them on it. I think for boards and commissions that don't have voting associated with them, it's fine to have remote meetings. I don't see any, you know, reason that can't happen. Again, you know, the critical thing in the statute is that voting has to be done in person. So I'm kind of tackling the open meetings thing and the recording and preservation of meetings thing, but they're a little bit hard to disentangle. So happy to answer any questions. I know I tried to cover a little bit more than what you were looking for.
No, I appreciate it. I have my own my own comments about the remote meetings, as annoying as it was, and I guess you could say not only unfamiliar but almost uncomfortable at times because of the just the mechanics of it, and not being able to, you know, reflect and we have masks on, there's no facial expressions, there's a different cadence in voice, everything changes when we go to the online environment. But after experiencing it and understanding what a useful tool it was, I think it's very useful in occasions where there are actual incapacities to attend a meeting in person. We have our mayor that won't be here this evening, and she's not allowed to attend remotely. And I think you know, that goes all the way into whether it's injury-based or health and wellness, et cetera. And again, I'm not trying to extend the conversation either, but it is something that I know is being considered elsewhere as continued practice. But no, I'm not interested in violating anything with the state statute.
Let me add two things to what you just said.
I just wish they would allow it in
more
given circumstances.
Yeah, I think there's some thought being given to that. There is an effort underway. I think it passed the Senate but not the House, or I'm not sure exactly the status. It's passed one House but not the other yet, to revive that. And that was really sort of driven by the Omicron situation in January. Unfortunately, all of these legislative measures always happen, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks too late. The issue with the mayor, and this is not unique to the mayor, but, you know, anyone can attend technically, they just can't vote.
Can't vote,
So,
yeah.
you know, and we had a situation earlier in the year, I think, where Melanie was unable to attend, but was able to phone in. It's not ideal logistically just because of the audio. But yeah, that is an option. and you can't vote by proxy. So the limitations statutorily are, must be present to vote, and can't vote by proxy, and minutes must be taken. That's what it boils down to.
Thank you. I'm going to just put a brief bit of attention to the statistics that Director Lee provided, because I apologize, anyone that is not on the committee didn't receive these. I'm sure he'd be happy to forward the exact same documentation to you ASAP. But suffice it to say, I am going to just simply recite the number of concurrent users watching our live stream for the past 7, 8, 9 meetings. This won't be difficult, and these are real. 5, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 4. So in light of that, I tend to think that the measures that we are taking, albeit that there have been some disadvantages, or at least one occasion where audio was not captured, I think it's our responsibility to keep some balance to the demand that we are seeing. And realistically, that is directly consistent with attendees that we have here in person, whether pandemic time or pre-pandemic. Director Lee, go ahead and expand on any of these statistics or the written report that you provided us in preparation for tonight's meeting.
Yeah, I also provided the statistics from when we had the virtual meetings. That's in the other stack, and each of you have a copy of that also. The numbers are similar.
They're single digits.
Yeah, they're single digits, and you have to account that during the virtual meetings, I was hosting them, so I was also watching, so you can reduce one. There's another city official that was also watching remotely, usually, so generally those can even be reduced by 2. I ran those statistics before getting quotes and deciding on a system for this place. I think that was a valid statistic to have, because when we're looking at $60,000, $50,000, $40,000, I think it really is important to know how many people that will affect doing a live stream. And so I included those because of that. The numbers haven't changed a whole lot since we've been live in person. And I think that's just a valid concern that you just shared about, you know, expenditures versus how many people it really affects. And especially when we have the local copy that can be uploaded for viewing after, that everybody still has an opportunity to watch it, they just might not be able to watch it in real time.
What, I'm kind of hogging this, but I'm trying to get kind of as much information out of Director Lee as we can so that questions can be produced with a certain backbone of foundation here. What, in information, you mentioned earlier that there was a time when we had the little mic pods placed. Why aren't those acceptable for use any longer? Or?
They probably are now. We were looking at this kind of in the height of the pandemic, and just airborne particle, people speaking into the mic, having to disinfect that, especially up at the having guests in, and again, having to disinfect everything.
So it wasn't a functional issue with those, it was a concern out of the
It was a concern.
potential,
Yes. Transmission.
remote potential of contamination.
Which is why we went with ceiling mics.
Okay.
And like I said, the ceiling mics, they're really effective, and I got word earlier that this is live streaming just fine.
Okay.
The audio is working fine. And when it does work, generally you can hear what everybody says without having to worry about the individual mics.
Thank you, and thank you to committee and council members. I'd be happy to. Of course.
I'm not giving up on this system, meaning that since I tested it today and I did 5 tests, 1 failed, I'm still working with the vendor to either come up with a replacement for that type of system, that type of unit, because it isn't just it's like a little Android device. I'm still going forward trying to get something that is 100% effective and not 90% or 80%.
Sure.
So I just want you to know that I'm still going down the path of trying to fix this. It's up to you whether you want to do something completely different, spend money, hire someone to videotape these. But I just want to say, I'm still working on trying to correct this issue.
Understood, thank you. Question?
I think I have a thought. So, when we were at the other building, were we ever live streaming? I know you were covering some of the historical, so we were live streaming there. And did we ever have I don't know,
We were not live streaming.
okay, so we had a local recording that
Or
was built.
before you started.
They were doing, she was uploading it the next day to,
That's what I recall too. I don't remember
Yeah,
that
she
we
was
started
never
live
live streaming.
streaming before.
the one where we didn't have any visitors in, and that's after I started. When COVID just started, our very last meeting up there, we attempted to live stream. And it didn't go all that well. But Gabby, the person, I think it was Gabby,
Gabby.
who was doing it before, she was only recording locally and then uploading it either that evening or the next day.
So, thank you for that. And I guess where my mind is how long will we be in this space?
The rest of our days.
So my thought is, will we go, is there a world in the near future where we will go back up the
Yeah.
hill?
Yeah.
And then in that scenario, would we use this system in that?
So, I think the new building, the new municipal building, with the new council chambers, will be outfitted with an entirely new AV system.
Right, so, I would hope, I hope that is true, but in the shorter term case where we,
I can answer.
yes.
I don't think there are any plans for us to return to the municipal building and council chambers that we had used there for decades.
So we would anticipate that, that's very helpful. So
That's
we
not a
don't know.
decision on my part,
Yeah.
but that's my understanding.
And
Yeah.
while parts of this system we could move parts of it,
Yeah.
we would have to have the vendor move the microphones and all the wiring involved with that. So it can be moved, but there would be a cost if we had to move this back to, up to the old the old council chambers
Yeah.
or another temporary location. It could be moved, there would be a cost associated.
Ryan, I know there's a considerable amount of attention that's being placed to the, all infrastructure elements of the facility that we're under planning now.
Yeah, that's an assumption that I made when we get when that comes to fruition, that we would have the technology that would meet the need for access that we would expect. So, I think this space, as we kind of talked about, has some this space itself just has some limitations in terms of, sort of the audio and kind of, distance and space and all of that. So I was just trying to get a sense of what the different scenarios could be and, kind of wrap my mind around that.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Ryan really asked the question that I was gonna ask you. That was my only,
Okay.
and I kind of assumed that too. Like it doesn't seem fiscally responsible to change anything now when we know that we're gonna be in a new facility. It'll take a little while, but
It will, yes.
we're
It's not
meeting,
next year.
we're meeting the necessary requirements of what we need to do
And so,
legally and then some, and there's already been money spent, and I don't think that it would behoove us to just throw more money at a problem that doesn't really need fixing.
It's
From
gonna
a-
be temporary.
Right.
and would potentially be temporary. From an improvement-based idea or collection of ideas, and again, I'm not able as facilities chair to trigger, recommend, but I think it's considered that we talk about or discuss the option to rearrange the room to make it potentially more appropriate to either camera angles or mic locations, et cetera. And, I'd be open the floor for that style of kind of approaching this and see if these things, notwithstanding the true technical elements of difficulty, but the actual, you know, our spatial configuration basically, can we do something different to, you know, help with that? Because this, I mean, it's
Yeah,
weird.
I don't like this either, and, you know, we're hopefully getting towards the end of all of this, and we don't need to be so spread out, and if we're not going back up the hill, can someone bring our table down here?
I
Like,
know
if
where
we
it
don't-
is.
Yeah.
It's not really coming here, I don't think.
Where did it
It
go?
takes,
Well, the other consideration is they still use this for exercise and.
Yeah.
Everything is
Such
not
a
broken
good
down.
movable.
Now,
It's
the
not-
idea of moving these closer, maybe creating an arch, getting everybody,
Yes.
Right.
that would help, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
Because we could focus, we could zoom in the camera to be a lot closer, we can rearrange the TV maybe and the guest speaker to be a little more accessible to the camera. There's things like that, the placement would help a lot.
Yeah, something, if we were to spend money on something, if there is such a thing that exists as a, like, movable table
Mhm.
that's arced like that, that's on wheels, or maybe that folds that, you know, instead of the glass dividers that are back here, if it's something that
I
can be,
can tell you they exist.
then that might be something we wanna look into so that we can have that. Cause even if we try to put these closer to, like, this, that's not gonna help, like, these are too big. So, maybe that's something that we can start.
Oh, I do like the workspace now.
I don't, because.
No, not that,
Oh,
this,
yeah, like this.
the top surface.
I don't like
May I
this
ask you a
skirt.
couple of questions?
Of course,
Not
go
quick
ahead.
number?
Yes, please, we'll open this all the way out, of course.
Thank you. I agree with some of the points you're making. When I went to watch after we received email to council, I noticed that this basically blocks Michelle and me both. So when we're speaking, I mean, if someone is having trouble, we have the masks, right, which is an impediment, and then we have a visual impediment here. So for someone that may be hard of hearing, to try to match our voices to the person speaking could be incredibly hard. I think I could hear pretty well, but I also know my colleagues' voices and sit in this space during every meeting. So I agree that could be something to adjust. I wonder what the numbers are, Brian, for those that watch on YouTube, not just live streaming, but after the fact, because I think that would be
I can pull
instructive.
those numbers also. The problem is if someone watches it twice, like Lilani starts doing her
Right.
meeting, her minutes, and then watches again, that keeps counting up.
Do you have a sense just of the ballpark though, like 30?
It's usually under
people,
30.
views?
I mean, I can
Under
look
30
up,
views.
I can look up and give you a ballpark, but it's generally under 30. I don't have it on that.
Yeah, my sense was that it wasn't
The previous one.
very, extravagantly large, but that it was larger than these.
It's
numbers
larger,
from
it's
having
just
looked at
not,
it before.
it's not
Yeah,
extravagantly larger. It's
Um,
20 or so probably, but again, it ranges from 9 to sometimes more, but
okay. And then I may have missed this, I apologize, I was a little bit late. Did we inquire with the schools who, like, what their cost point is? Because they have a videographer, I believe, and I watched one of theirs and it sort of zooms in and zooms out, and of course their space is better and different. But I thought maybe that'd be an easy way to get a
yeah,
cost point.
Michelle, I
I
can,
You mentioned that.
I
Okay.
asked,
Chris Dice.
for Kate Matney, and then she put me in touch with Chris Dice, and he told me that the equipment is a very labor-intensive process, because they have someone taking the video while there, and they spent $6,000 on a sound, like some sound equipment.
Okay.
And then the person who's doing the video is paid $400 for each time they come.
Yeah,
And then and then they have someone taking it and matching up the video and the sound and adding the closed caption.
okay,
So it gets put out a few days later.
okay.
And it sounded, I just shared the information, it sounded like a lot of money, but I wasn't even sure how much, like what you were talking about, this current system we have, I wasn't sure how much that would cost. But yeah, $400, and because I feel like well, that was the first time I ever watched a school board meeting. We don't have kids, so I've never attended those. I don't know if they have special meetings or theirs are really only once a month. Because if it's once a month, $400, but then with these, if we're having special meetings and the committee meetings, I can see how that would add up.
Yeah.
And planning commission,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they tend to be long.
Yeah.
Is that also sorry, is that also not a live stream? I think I was.
It's not.
I think they do live streaming,
Okay.
so I think the videographer is also live streaming. And of course, that is an option. If you hire somebody to provide the live stream and the recording, then of course they can pan and zoom whoever's speaking, and it really works really well, but it does get expensive, and you have to have a company that has backup, because we have so many meetings. We have, all the meetings we're streaming, if you do it for one, really you should do it for all, and if that's the case, you have to have a company that has resources available for every meeting. And so that would not be cheap, it would not be inexpensive to do that. But of course, you're gonna get a much better quality because you have a live person zooming in, focusing on whoever's speaking.
Right.
And again, something to keep in mind with schools as opposed to us is that they're in their permanent, structure or whatever, as we're just kind of temporary still.
Right, so I
Play
mean,
it along, that's
this wouldn't
what
have
it
to be a forever cost. I mean, it would be temporary, right, until we would be in a new facility.
With
So
it,
I,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I would say, we did have someone who would come in and record live, and it became a big problem if they canceled last minute and not having a backup, or Bob, I think, ran it once,
Mhm.
so that not only does it get expensive, but also you run the risk of not being able to record it at all. Or having a fluctuation of quality, because we have to constantly running the equipment. So that was an issue that we had.
Now, there is technology, some other cities, I mean, you may have heard or seen, but some other cities have systems that will attempt to track, the camera will track and zoom whoever the speaker is. They run upward over 100,000 for the system, and plus there's additional staff time that I read about that is also involved even with this system, because again, they say these things are plug and play, but generally they're not, and it takes involvement with the staff to troubleshoot and to fix problems as they arrive during the meeting. So if it's not tracking right, we have to fix that before it gets to be a problem. So there are systems that attempt to do that, but again, they're very expensive.
There are some other alternatives we haven't seriously looked at because, each thing has its pluses and its minuses. So I'll just mention Upper Arlington uses Facebook Live to do its live streaming. If we were ever gonna think about doing something like that, I would turn off the comments feature because it's extremely distracting and just kind of nonstop, like, smiley faces and crazy stuff, who knows? It's not really pertinent to the discussion that's taking place. I think some other communities do the same. If you want, any sort of analysis around who's doing what or using what kinds of formats, let me know and I can ask around with my peers.
We chose not to go with Facebook because you have to have a Facebook account.
Oh, right, yeah,
And so we don't expect everyone to have a Facebook account,
yeah.
nor
Every resident.
every resident.
Right.
If they want to watch it, they should be able to watch it without having an account, which is why YouTube was the best option, because anybody can pull up the page and watch it.
Go ahead.
Is there a way to get the closed captions? I don't know what technology would be needed for that, because that would help with, I don't know if they can pick up on the sound to translate it and put it out there. And I do know someone in our community who's deaf, and
Okay.
she is someone who would be politically active and probably would enjoy knowing what we're saying here.
I can look into that and do some tests and see if if it will work, yes.
And then that would take care of the constituent who wrote in too. I mean, that you could view it if you can't hear it from the
Well, I think
audio.
it's gonna run off of what,
That's
it
why,
wouldn't,
yeah.
it wouldn't translate anything
Yeah.
because of that. So if the auto's not working, it's not gonna work
Oh.
with that closed caption. But, for what it is working, absolutely, I will see if that's an option.
But Brian, it could be, when the audio might have a glitch or not work, but what I was suggesting earlier, that some people who are hard of hearing, the audio isn't of the volume that they need, right? Whereas I might be able to hear it 20 years from now, I might have a challenge, or 10 years from now, as much as my toddler screams in my ear, I might have trouble, hearing it. So I think closed caption would work if it were a case of someone else hard of hearing.
Yes, I'm saying it would work, but
Yeah.
if the live stream audio, because the closed caption would be
Oh.
associated with the live stream, it
No,
would be a
I'm with
YouTube function that's doing that.
Okay,
So if the audio is poor, the YouTube closed caption probably wouldn't pick up on anything. We would still have the local recording, but we would not have closed caption on the local recording.
yeah.
We're gonna take the next couple minutes to summarize. We have to turn this over to economic development at 6:45. I'd be more than willing to continue the conversation, whether it is in the other comments portion of our council meeting, now that President Keeler has arrived. We did cover a lot of ground prior to your arrival, and we can maybe pick that up, but I'd love to hear some thoughts on the comfort levels of all of my colleagues, yourselves included, on the potentially revisiting the use of the pod-style microphones so that they are local and directly in front of the source of voice. And then also certainly entertain more conversation for potentially rearranging the room so that it's more applicable to the camera angle. So I think focusing on the things that we can do in light of the balanced needs of everyone and the budgets involved, the frequency, the number of occasions where we do have meetings, the fact that we're in a facility that is temporary for us at this point, and that all measures are being taken to ensure the best quality of AV equipment in our new building. I think that's, from my perspective, I'm only the chair, there's 7 of us, so I'd love to continue with that conversation and see if we can come up with a compromised solution that benefits everyone, that doesn't harm any of us or create any discomfort. There's no wrong answer. So, any other questions, comments?
My only comment would be, I would also support a reconfiguration that would be possible and still in keeping with the, health requirements that we have, but I think that would be a good first step, if we can do that, figure out how to reconfigure the room. And, if there are other audio options that we can explore, that'd be a good first step. Because, like you guys have already mentioned, I don't, support any real expense for this temporary solution, because we know that we're heading to something else. But do want to make it accessible for folks who want to follow along.
Any further comments? Thank you. We will adjourn at 6:44.